Welcome back to Dominate Your Day. I have an amazing guest with us today. She's had 130 deployments. Let me just describe this woman to you because you're going to go, what? She's had 130 deployments, which is crazy. She's responsible for managing Texar's relationship with Guadalupe Mountain National Park. She's been a member of Texas Search and Rescue for almost 13 years, and she does this all as a volunteer. So welcome to the show, Meg Hinkley.
Thank you, Dane. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for that lovely introduction.
Yeah, well, it's just such a surprise to hear that you do all this and you've had 130 deployments and you've gotten a lot of awards, but all the things that you do, all in the what I see in your strengths and what you're made to do. So tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how you got into this role of leading North Texas Search and Rescue.
Right. Yeah. I actually had my own business, Athena Strategies, where I teach women self-defense seminars and done that for 30 years. But as a volunteer for the last 13 years, I started with Texas Search and Rescue in 2013. And there had been some tornadoes in Moore, Oklahoma, and they were looking for volunteers to go help. And so my friend called, and I had just finished a contract and was off the next week. And we said, hey, let's go up there. We're able-bodied. We take instructions well. I'm sure we can help. And we made some phone calls to see where we could plug ourselves in. And they kept asking about, what certifications do you have? What organization are you with? What is your training? And we just said, it's Megan Doris from Dallas and we want to help. And they
Mm,
said, no, thank you. We need,
wow.
and what I learned about, that's called a spontaneous volunteer. And those people well-meaning. And so I understand when people join Techstars with the same intent, you want to get out there and be useful right at that moment for that particular disaster or missing person. But you can end up being a statistic because you don't know what you're doing. And it's easily to get injured and get hurt. And there's so many processes. And so we found Texas Search and Rescue after that joined. And then we understood why, yeah, you would need to be trained and certified to do these things. And so I just got very interested in it. And so my initial interest was disaster response, but ended up, Techstar covers so many areas from current missing, like somebody walks off that has Alzheimer's or dementia,
Mhm.
right, from a nursing home, or a missing child that didn't come home after school and was in the woods. A cold case. We do a lot of cold case work. There's over 40,000 missing people in the state of Texas. That
40,000. Did you just say 40,000
it's
missing
like,
people?
yes.
Oh my
Yes. And so the Attorney General's office is trying to decrease those numbers. Some of those people have returned home or have been found, but so many of them, we are helping work through a lot of those cold cases. And as new information comes in, then we have a great team that we can send out that can look at that search area in a new way. And then we have HRD canines, human remain dogs, that can come in and they can smell remains from, gosh, we've had solved cases. Last year, one was 38 years old where the dog smelled the remains still. So we're able to at least give
wow.
some answers to families. Yeah.
Wow. So let's talk about just bringing this to life for our audience because you're in a leadership role. While you're volunteering, you're in a leadership role. But why don't you take us back to those 7 straight days that you were leading a team through the Texas Hill Country floods, and that was last summer. Take us back to day one. What did the scene look like?
Well, when we arrived from North Texas, we had actually been at another deployment that morning on the 4th of July out at Lake Benbrook, which was just more of a preventative being there because they have a lot of drownings that take place. And so we got the call, and teams started to go. And we have teams from across the state. So I'm North Texas, but we have 4 other divisions. And so people were coming from all of those divisions with our swiftwater resources, our rescue boats, and then our ground teams to start searching. And so when we got there, it was, it was chaotic. Um, and then as we were preparing to go into the water with our boats to look for people, we'd had to wait for a while because there's so much debris in the water. This was right at the height where everything had risen and starting to come down. That for anybody that was there with our rescue boats, the engines, the motors were sucking in that debris and it was destroying, a $10,000 engine. And so
Oh my
you
gosh.
have to wait. We had to wait until we could go out in the water. So the first time I got out in the water with our team was 10 o'clock at night, and we started searching at that point.
Oh my
And I just
gosh.
remember thinking too how quiet it was at that point because so many people had left, but then you're on the water and it was dark and it was very quiet. And I remember thinking how um, I don't want to say it wasn't eerie, it was just this silence after after all this devastation.
And you were out there leading the team. And how did you, I mean, you do this, full time without a paycheck, right? And nobody really
Right.
required you to be there. So what made you choose to be there at that moment in time when other people would never even consider being in the boat in the dark, in a flood, looking for survivors?
I really believe in our mission in Texar. I've always said I can't imagine having a family member missing and not being able to do anything, not being able to find them, and not having people, sometimes in some of these cold cases, especially interested to help. They feel like they're on their own. But it's so important to be out there as soon as you can because you don't want the environment to take over any longer than it has and make it more difficult to find someone. And so I just really, like I said, I really believe in that work. And this is more of a newer realization I have. But back when we talked the last time in 2021,
Yes.
um, and I had recently lost a brother to a criminal situation. And for a while, we couldn't get any police to help.
Mm.
This was in another state. It was during COVID. It was so chaotic. And I finally got a call from a detective who said to me, your brother's life mattered. I want to help you. And I remember at that point, I was told my husband, I don't think it even matters if we find out who's responsible for hurting Mark. The
Mhm.
fact that somebody cares and believes us and says that his life mattered means everything. And when I was doing work with Texar afterwards, we've always had families that say, thank you, thank you, thank you. Even when we don't find them, we try, but we don't
Mhm.
find them. And I know they're just like, thank you for caring, thank you for showing up, but you feel bad. You want to give them an answer. But I could relate so much more after that just by having somebody say, his life mattered. I want to help you.
Mhm.
That meant everything. And you can start to heal from there, right?
Mhm.
It's when somebody says, I don't care and don't bother me again. And so I know that's what we do for families, just by showing up to look, whether we find them or not, they know we care, that somebody cares, and that agency cares that brought us out. Because we don't go out on our own. We are only brought in by agencies that bring us in. So, yeah.
Wow. So let's go back to that moment. It was 10 o'clock at night. It was eerily, it was quiet. The water was not, it was still, it was still full, but there was, it was
Yeah, we're
quiet.
starting to recede. Yeah.
So what did your leadership look like then for in real time? When you look back at that moment, how many people did you have with you in the water at that moment?
So I was on a rescue boat as a swimmer, and so what's interesting within Texar is leadership is fluid depending upon the situation you're in, and so
Mm,
I run a division, but sometimes I can run a search, like the one I mentioned to you that was in another state recently. We
hmm.
had an individual within Texar who was running, and that kind of switched off depending upon the day from a senior level, some of the command operations. And then I was a team lead in the field. So I would have a team every day with an assignment that I would take out. And my number one job as team leader is their safety, my safety first. That people always surprises people. The number one person on a mission is me. Second is
Hmm.
my teammates. Third is the person we're looking for. Because if something happens to me, then none of us are looking. Everything stops. Or if something
Hmm.
happens to one of my team. So my number one job is safety. And then after that, giving them the assignment and making sure that we execute our assignment. And so, but like that night, for example, going out on the boat, the guy driving the boat who is in my division, who reports to me, but he was in charge of me that night because
Mm-hmm.
he runs the boat, and the swimmers, myself and another member who were in the front with the floodlights looking, and if we needed to, we'd go into the water. But he's in charge of us because he runs the boat. So you'll have some fluid changes in who's in charge, and you really need those trust levels there, and you have to be able to make that switch too, that if he tells me what to do, I do it.
And that is a good point, I think, for leadership. I think so many people are caught up in their roles and their titles instead of what does the moment need from me right now and what is my role in this moment. And I love how you
Yeah,
use the example of he was driving the boat, so he was in charge of you because you were the swimmer and you were listening to
yeah,
what he was guiding you to do. So were you actually, did you jump in that water and did you have to get in the water and
we
swim?
did, we did. Yeah, we spent time in the water. Hmm.
Mm.
And
So,
so in the first, several days we're in the water, and then we start walking the shoreline to start going through the debris pile. So those first couple days you're looking for any possibility of survivors and just people, frankly, that are floating. And then after that, you're going to see less of that as the water goes down and the debris piles emerge in other areas where individual remains can get caught up. And so now you're walking in and out of the water, but searching those debris piles. And then we can bring the dogs in, like on the third day, because the smell of human remains is going to be there for them to start helping and detecting at that point.
mm. Is there a story from that night or the next couple of days that is something that you recall that kind of shares your mission of why you do this work?
There were several, but one that really struck me was our team had located an individual, um, and we had called. There was a procedure we would go through to contact um, who was in command to come. We found this individual. Do you want us to collect them? How do you want to handle this? And there were people, families walking up and down also on that outer shoreline. They were trying to keep them out. But I
Mm-hmm.
remember an older, well, like I would say the man was maybe 70, I don't know. And then it was his son that was with him, maybe in his 40s. But he started asking me some questions about the individual and was it a female and did she look like this? Because they're trying to find his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And, you just don't even know what to say to somebody in that situation. And I can't give him those answers either, except, we have to wait and see and make sure that they have the right contacts and they know who to contact. But that just brings it in such a crushing way that, these people are just so lost and they want to
Mm-hmm.
do something and they're just walking up and down the shoreline waiting to hear about something that's happened and then coming over to say, hey, do you think it might be this person? Or, and it just is, that's, I think that's, I would say for all of us, that's why we do what we do, so
Mm-hmm.
that those families can have their loved ones returned and that they have at least an answer. That's very, very important to them.
You know what I'm reminded of when you share that story is the story about your brother Mark and how that one agent really was able to connect with you and say, we
Hmm.
care about this. And I bet that's what you did with your strengths
I
because
hope.
you
I
do
hope.
have empathy, right? So, how did that come into
Yeah.
play?
Oh, I think. I mean, I think it definitely does, I think I'm comfortable being with people.
Mm-hmm.
Like we always say, we're with Texans on their worst day,
Mm,
and I think we're. I know I can't solve. I can't make it better, but I
mm.
can just sit with them if that's what they need and be with them.
And
You
it
know,
sounds like what you did.
when we get that
Um,
opportunity.
So, we talk on the show here a lot about Clifton strengths and how those bring us energy, especially during a tough situation like you're talking about in leading in a search and rescue. Can you share with the audience your strengths? Because I hear them in these stories and I want to make sure they hear them as well.
Sure. Sure. So my number one is empathy. Hopefully I don't get the order out, but I believe it's
Okay.
empathy, adaptability.
Hmm.
Um,
I have
is
communication.
communication,
Yep.
communication next, then woo, then positivity.
Positivity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that whole, oh, here comes a family member. Let me empathize with him, but tell him how I can help him. And that's what I heard in your story. And then that adaptability, being able to adapt through all the situations when you talked about, okay, I'm not the leader in charge tonight. I'm the swimmer. Who's my leader? Who's the one riding the boat?
Hmm.
And then just the key communication. You talked about communication was real important. Once you all found somebody and how you communicate that and how that goes, whether it's to somebody on the shoreline or to your direct responsibility people, the agencies that you
Hmm.
report to. And then just keeping things as you can positive during that situation. So, how do you manage your own emotions while you're managing a team in these life and death conditions? How do you do that?
I'm very good at compartmentalizing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all have to be pretty good at that in the field, to manage those emotions. And the other thing that happens over a period of a week, you're tired, you're not sleeping. If you're sleeping 3 hours at night, you are really lucky that you're getting that in.
Mm-hmm.
And we're tired, we're exhausted. It's easy to get frustrated with little things or your
Mm-hmm.
teammates. It's normal. And I think my positivity helps a lot with that. I'm always trying to, come on, we've got this. Let's do this. Let's don't worry about that. Because people do get very afraid. And so, you're looking out for them as well and for emotionally, how are they handling things? How are they mentally handling things? Because that can impact their ability to keep themselves safe, right? If they're struggling with something. But I would say compartmentalizing for me has been very helpful. And then we have a lot of resources that Texar provides us, whether we need any type of trauma counseling,
Mm-hmm.
afterwards, which I know a lot of us took advantage of that. It's very helpful. And so I know I'm going to get a time to process that. Um, but in the moment, you really do need to be able to maintain and be a professional, have empathy, all of those things, but you've got to do that because if you
Mm-hmm.
just sort of let yourself feel when you felt it, you're not going to get anything done.
And you brought up a good point. So, empathy in its balcony, we call it balcony and basements. Empathy in its balcony is just, I feel the team, I feel these family members, I feel everything. It can go in its basement really fast if we're not managing how we're processing. And so the fact that you take that time to process and use the the skills and all the tools that Texar has is amazing. But one of the other areas we don't talk very much about is that you can turn the empathy on yourself. And you just mentioned that about I have to kind of see how I'm feeling and do I need to compartmentalize this right now instead of holding that. So I think that is pretty powerful. The other thing that comes in here is, and you talked about one word, which was trust, which is the trust between the leaders and the team and all that. I would say, would you say that's one of your core values when you think about?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely to have that, and the integrity and the trust. And, I'm working with people that have 30 years military experience. Some of them have been a ranger or a SEAL, right? Or they've run search organizations in other states. They're firefighters, they're policemen. My assistant division lead, Eli, is a paramedic, a police officer, and a firefighter. He's triple certified and he rotates between
Wow.
those three roles. And so that's a kind of operational experience I have. So sometimes I do kind of laugh if they're reporting to me on a mission. And again, I'm helping them
Mm-hmm.
carry out what our mission is that day. But it's very easy for me to flip and report to them when we're doing something because they are so skilled and
Mm.
have so much knowledge in areas that most of us never see. And so it really is cool to work for an organization where I can tell me what you want me to do, and I completely trust them. I trust them with my life.
And I think that adaptability. So I see the core value of your trust, but the adaptability of, oh, I'm going to lean on Eli for this because that's not my, it's that trust, or we're getting ready to jump in the water and I need to know that my partner here swimming with me is got it. My the person leading me has got it. So that trust you're talking about.
Yep,
What would be some of your
absolutely.
other core values that, if you even haven't identified them, that you just know automatically that they're important to you, or have you thought about those?
Um, yeah, I mean, overall, in terms of values of my life, my, faith, my family,
Hmm.
and then comes my work after that, and that's very
Hmm.
important. Keeping who I am authentically as a leader.
Hmm.
That those things are important to me, and those are who I am in the work that I do. But the trust, the integrity of
Hmm.
people that they are going to do what they say they're going to do is very, very important. And then I think even just that work ethic of we train a lot together, and that's where you really start to learn about each other is through
Hmm.
training, and where you develop that trust, and where hey, that person isn't just going to make a guess on are we close
Hmm.
enough? They're going to use the right tools to make sure so nobody gets injured. Like you just start to, that's how we learn to trust one another is when
Hmm.
we train together. And then you also start to build some of that camaraderie, and we get to know each other as humans. And so I think that connection, that's important too, to know, who the people that are working under you and that you're working with, what's important to them as much as you can. The organization grew significantly, Dana, after the Kerrville floods. It's a
Really?
it's a well-known thing that for nonprofits such as Texar, this is when we get all the attention, right? And
Hmm.
so, and when people wanted to donate to an organization, or people that said, "Hey, I want to go help. I want to do something like that." So just like I wanted to go help that day with the tornadoes, we have all these people that want to come join Texar because they want to go help in the floods. Well, they found out it's going to be like 6 months if they moved quickly to get everything certified and do what they needed to do. But we tripled the size of our organization in the weeks after Kerrville. And so I went from my team of 75 that at least I knew everybody's name and prided myself in knowing something about them, to 250 something where, oh, are you on my team? Oh, okay. Yeah, so
Wow.
that's suddenly that way that I like to operate, which is by knowing people and having a connection. I had to, I'm still working through that. I've had to give that up in
And
a
I
way.
think what you're describing right now is what's happening in a lot of organizations, not only nonprofit like yours and volunteer like yours, but even in corporate organizations where they've had layoffs and they've had situations
Hmm.
where leaders have gotten more people underneath them now than ever before.
Yeah.
And so, how did you manage through that? How do you lead a team through that? Going from 75 to 250. That's a lot.
um, yeah, there was no script. There's three other division leads. We leaned on each other. We
Mm-hmm.
leaned on our leadership. We pushed,
Mm-hmm.
we leaned, we screamed, everything. I think, but what the cool thing was from our CEO to our amazing staff that we have. We have everybody above me is paid staff.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of those folks, I knew that they were working 20-hour days in those weeks. And when we were in Kerrville and when things were happening, I told you, I'm lucky if you get 3 hours sleep a night. If I called somebody at 11 o'clock at night back on staff or back at home, they're answering the phone. They're
Mm.
there, they're working. What can we do? What do you need? Um, and so we were all working those long hours. So I think just the support and there was very little whining. We were, it would have been okay, would have been understandable, but we were tired, we were overwhelmed, but we just sort of kept stepping through it. And I really relied on my team so much more. And I have a leadership team within North Texas, and man, they picked up the slack like unbelievably, and they all took on more, and then found people. I'm going to need an assistant at this time now. I'm going to need this. I'm going to need that, and
Mhm.
just we're finding a new way now of what this looks like. And we had just done a huge plan, um, strategic plan for North Texas of what we wanted to do in terms of training and everything. Middle of June, we were just getting ready to implement that. Then Kerrville happened. We have 150 new members who don't have any training that we've got to get there. So that plan went out the window, just like Texar's plan and budget went out the window. But we suddenly had all these new additional resources and incredible generosity from donors that allowed us to let's just say Texar had a plan of equipment that we need to acquire that was going to take years, and we've been slowly acquiring over the years. And we've got it all now. It's all there.
Wow.
So I went from, yeah. So everything changed very quickly due to the wonderful generosity of donors and people that want to support this kind of work and participate in it.
And so we didn't share with the audience in this episode about your past and what you've been doing that led up to the volunteer work, but tell the audience a little bit about the training you've been doing with self defense and how you've been helping others before you started this deep work in Texar.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've been love teaching self-defense. I'm a survivor of a sexual assault when I was a senior in high school, just after I'd graduated. And this just got me very interested in understanding everything about personal safety. I've got my black belt in martial arts, although I don't teach that, but I teach more of the psychology about it. And I find the psychology of everything interesting, whether it's there's a lot of tie over between what I do with self-defense and what I've done with Texar, and what happens to all of us when we're afraid and how our bodies change, and then how does that impact how I'm able to operate in a situation if somebody's trying to hurt me, and I need to be able to execute skills that work well under adrenal stress, and then to be able to understand the characteristics, generally speaking, of predators and other things. So it really is it's physical. It's a physical piece that you're teaching,
Hmm.
and teaching people how to go, particularly for women, to find a vulnerability and a weakness. And we're not going to try to out strengthen, that 6'2", 200-pound guy, that predator, that bad guy. But there are ways that we can prevail if you know the right targets to go for. And then preparation being key all the time. And that's really, there's a similar tie-in with Texar too, of that preparation, for natural disasters and other things. I never used to have that preparation in my home, but I do now since I started with Texar, because now I understand why, the emergency management tells us to do these particular things.
So, what have you learned in the last 13 years in this role now, and then in the last 5 years as a division leader? But what have you learned that you want to make sure other people understand about self defense and search and rescue that you think everybody really needs to think about?
Just think about having that idea of learning everything you can to take care of yourself and your family and do that preparation, whether that's so understanding how to keep yourself safe and what that looks like. And that's very different for a lot of people, right?
Hmm.
Um, but understanding that, being ready to do that same thing with natural disasters responses, or the freeze we went through like 4 years ago when we had all the power outages, right, in
Hmm.
February. And there were a lot of people that really found themselves in dire straits, without clean water, without food, that live in North Texas. This is not supposed to be where
Hmm.
people would be struggling for something, but it can so easily happen. And so be self-reliant and responsible, take care of yourself and your family, and then you're going to be able to take care of your neighbors when something happens. And that's really important. And there's a psychology around all of that, that when we don't know what to do and panic sets in, that can have a lot of bad results, whether that's from a self-defense situation or a situation, again, where with all the things we have going on in the world right now, if somebody hits a piece of our infrastructure, for example, let's say they hit the power grids or something, for the first 24 hours, people get along pretty well. But then if people aren't prepared, 48, 36 hours, people start to get desperate and start to do things. And that's where you can see chaos start to happen, and crime and
Hmm.
other things that you need to be prepared to address. But the more of us that understand what's going on and some simple preparations and things that we can do, we can minimize that. But during blue sky days, it's not something people typically want to think
Exactly.
about, right?
Wow. And I love that you have positivity. So you're not like always thinking about doom and gloom, right?
No, I'm
You're just
not.
like,
I'm
this is
definitely a
going.
half glasses half full person for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
but I think just that activator of what do I know? How do I train my body? What do I need to teach? You've been working with high school um, women
Yeah.
about how to self defense, and now using those same skills in search and rescue. And I love how you made that correlation. Just the prep, just being prepared is better the stress that could come of not being prepared and having to go through something. Is that what I'm hearing?
Definitely. And for all of us, if we know that we have the tools available to manage our environment better, not make sure nothing bad ever happens to us, but okay, if this happens or that happens, I can manage it better. You just feel more confident. You don't have that free floating anxiety all the time, right? And stress
Mm-hmm.
because you've taken action to do something. I remember when the pandemic started and then Texar got involved in testing centers. And this was at the very beginning, right? When we didn't know how bad this
Mm.
um, potential disease was, what was going to happen, all of these things. And so I volunteered to go work in one of the testing centers. And, I think we were all anxious at that point. But by taking action and going to do something, I felt so much better
Mm.
because I wasn't sitting at home thinking like, oh no, and watching the news cycle. I was busy doing something to help. And that is such an antidote for taking away stress and anxiety about
Mhm.
something. Get busy helping somebody doing something, do what you can do, and be a part of helping with the problem. And that's also going to help your own anxiety because it keeps you from, or me, I would be one of those people that would tend to sit and chew on something and have it make me more anxious versus if I go out and help, now I'm not thinking about that.
Absolutely. And to see, I think, what our children, grandchildren are going through that have, gone through the last COVID stuff and all that, and however their parents are responding, then that's how they're responding. And so, how do you have a kind of household that's kind of ready for disaster, but knows that it's not living for it? And so
Very
that's
good. I like how you say that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So, one of the things that Meg, you and I did before this podcast was I had you take your authentic imprint, which is a framework I created that helps leaders really discover their unique, authentic identity. And the formula for authentic imprint is strengths plus your core values plus your mission times your emotional recognition. And you scored so high in your values and your mission, and I was like, wow. And what do you think your mission is right now? And when you, if you could put it in words of what you are here to do as a leader, as a wife, as a mom, you talked about family, faith, you talked about trust, but when your mission every day, what do you feel like your mission every day is as a leader?
Wow, that's a big question.
Yeah.
I mean, within Texar, I'm clear on that. It's having our team be ready. So when something
Mhm.
happens, we are operationally ready to address whatever has
Mhm.
come up, whether it's a missing person or it's another disaster, and that we have the resources that we need and both the physical and mental preparation to go after the mission. So I'm very clear on that. And our mission, again, is Texans helping Texans and being with
Mhm.
Texans on their worst day. And so that's just such an easy mission to get around, to get your
Mhm.
brain around and to get behind, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then, the same, I feel like with my family, since I'm blessed to be at a point in my life where I'm not, my husband is retired.
Mhm.
He handles a lot of things here at home while I'm busy. But he's very busy doing his own volunteer work as well. But we're at a great point in our life where we get to commit time to the things we believe in and helping and
Mhm.
supporting other people and then also being there for each other and being there
Mhm.
for my kids. Sometimes
Mhm.
Texar gets in the way of that. It's been a lot of work, so I've missed a lot of things. It's impacted my family, but they've been
Mhm.
very, very supportive. But that's kind of my world right now,
Mhm.
is that, and of course a new grandchild who's a
Yes,
huge part of that new world.
which is
Yeah.
congrats. That is so
Thank
exciting.
you.
But it's like
Thank
doing
you.
life and living life, and knowing that your family mission is a little bit different from your work mission, but both of them have some similarities, and it's just being
Yes,
prepared,
for sure.
right? So, was
For
there
sure.
anything that you were surprised by when you took the authentic imprint?
Yeah, I think I was somewhat surprised at how closely everything did align for me, but then when I thought about it, it wasn't as surprising. And then I had shared with you earlier some things about feeling, there's a lot of technical skills and very specific for example, navigation skills or things that were required to be able to execute well on this team, whether you're a division lead or you're somebody on the team. And those are
Mhm.
things that that are not, don't come easy for me. Some of the basic skills of what we do in search and rescue don't come easy for me in terms of how my brain works.
Mhm.
I do have more of, like, my top 5 skills. So the empathy, the communication, all of those things are very natural for me, but having to struggle with some of the technical pieces, but in a way that also makes it more enjoyable, the challenge
Mhm.
of doing that when you're able
Mhm.
to do that and figuring out how to rely on your team. You definitely have to rely on your team because I have
Mhm.
some, like I said, I'm so many smart people on
Yeah.
this team, that can do those things. That, thank goodness for that, being able to do that.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Meg, because I think so many of us think that we have to have be perfect at every talent, as a leader, and to be able to say, I'm really, this is my thing. I can do all these things, but I need to partner with you to help me do this. And what we always say is we
Mhm.
want the team to be well rounded, but not the individual, because you have unique talents. But you have some high
Right.
talents in your influencing with your maximizer and your communication and your woo. And those are going to help you influence the situation. So I always say go to your most dominant domain, which for you is that influencing domain. You also have command, which is getting people to do what, directly and decisively in a way that they feel like, I want to follow her. And you might not realize it because these are also natural to you. And so it's pretty
Hmm.
neat when you start seeing them come together and you start using them. And so I'm curious, when you look at those top five, empathy, adaptability, communication, will, and positivity, which one do you think that the people you lead feel most from you? Do they feel one of those, or maybe one of the other ones?
I think probably the positivity, we have with we have a I think how to say this. I think a lot of the people I lead are very strong leaders in their own right. And
Mm-hmm.
so they have to, if you've been leading in the military for 30 years, right, and you come into an organization like this that's leading in a similar fashion, and you might have ideas about how we did this in the military or how we did this in fighting when we were fighting wildland fires in California, whatever. People that have done amazing things and been in leadership positions, and sometimes, why are we doing it this way, or why can't we do this, or I don't understand how we didn't, have a unit that does this. And so you want to bring them along and grow them and get them invested in the organization and to see what we're doing, how the amazing impact this organization is having. I mean, it's easy. It's not something I have to work to sell to do that. And that, we're developing a lot of things we're going to need their help with, and some things we have a reason of why we do that. So you want to win them over to that and bring them on board with how we're doing things. So I think I do use a lot of the positivity and probably some of the woo in that as well, of trying to win people over to, why we do things the way we do. And I always say, for some people, they get very passionate, maybe about a difference that they feel strongly about, is, you are a volunteer in this organization. And so if it is driving you so crazy that we're not doing something a certain way, and I don't mean this in a negative way, there are other places to volunteer like this. Is, you don't have to be here. This
Right.
is, hopefully we're all here because we want to make a difference. And even if you're going to do it in a way that maybe I would do it differently, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. We're
Mm-hmm.
all here to help and find that one person.
I love that. So, what do you think that your team rarely sees from you that you have, but they don't know you have in your talents? Maybe you have it, they just don't, they don't name it. Where they could name the positivity and the woo, and you could go into those 10 as well: the maximizer, developer, individualization, command. Is there one that you think they rarely name?
Um, I know this is going to sound funny, but um, I think in some sense, maybe the empathy,
Mm-hmm.
because there is so much to do and we have so many members that that regular daily, that connection I like to have with my team, and I certainly have with my leadership team and many people on the team. I can't do that for everybody. It's just
Mm-hmm.
time in the day or the time to get to know people. And then when you're in the field trying to do something, it's, here's your task, you need to get that done. And you're definitely operating off that chain of command, and this is not the time to ask questions or to tell me you disagree with me or for us to talk about how you're feeling about this. Go get the job done. And so I, particularly when you're in charge of so many, I think I can come across as not caring.
Mm.
I care about the mission greatly, and I
Mm-hmm.
care about them. And probably because I do have so much empathy, it bothers me that I don't get to have those touch
Mm-hmm.
point moments with everybody on a mission, or that people that come and serve some of these missions and have traveled 10 hours to get there and serve for a week and give their heart and drive home, and I didn't get to say thank you,
Mm.
to that person for whatever reason. It's that kind of stuff where I feel like the things that are important to me, I don't get to have the time to put those out, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I love that on the assessment, on the authentic imprint assessment, you scored really high, higher than most people in emotional recognition. So I think that is empathy in its mature state of I've got to turn this one down. I might need to turn my command up now because I've got to
Yeah,
get the mission completed.
yeah.
Um, and so
I
then,
like that. You make me feel better about that. It's my
yes,
empathy in its mature state.
right. Because our,
Thank you.
you've
Yeah.
got it in a mature state. A lot of us have empathy, but we don't realize how to manage it. And so it's
Interesting.
learning to turn that one off and turn another one up. And
I like
so
that.
for you, I would say you're going right to that individualization or the command, and you're not making the problem. You're going for your purpose and your mission. We've got to get this.
Yeah.
We've got to save these people.
Yeah.
Um, so for any leader that's listening right now, whatever their arena is, whether in corporate, nonprofit, volunteer, is there one thing you want them to take from your story into their very next decision? They might be leading with empathy and don't know how to turn that off. There might be some other area, but is there one thing you'd want to tell to those younger leaders that you're leading right now that are new into leadership?
I think to hopefully be doing work where you absolutely believe your mission is the right mission and you believe it with your
Mhm.
heart and soul. And if you are trying to execute and complete that mission, people are going to sense that about you, and you want to do it with integrity. And I feel like if you do that I think integrity is very key on that. And with that trust that you have their safety and their best interest at heart, even if that means telling them sometimes, I've had to tell members, I need you to go home. You don't have
Mm,
the physical fitness. You're not well enough to be on this search. I think you're too
mm,
tired. I think you're too emotionally attached to whatever the issue might be. I'm sending you home, but to know that that's for the overall integrity of the mission, and I want them back on the next one.
oh, I
And
love that.
so it's I think believing in the mission, executing it with integrity, and then other things that you maybe don't get time to do or don't go as well. But I think people forgive when they see your intention, though, is to complete that mission, to whatever that mission is, and to also bring and grow as many people as your team along with that.
Mm,
And however clunky that looks sometimes, and sometimes it does
mhm,
look kind of clunky, or you miss things, or you realize I should have been using that person over there,
mhm,
just however you come to those realizations. um, Everybody realizes that you're in a difficult position, but you're trying to do the right thing, and
mhm.
that's what draws people to you as a leader, I think, is when people know you are trying to do the right thing. You're not in it for yourself. You're not in it to get something specific out of that for yourself. You're in it to complete the mission.
And
And people will forgive a lot.
that is such a powerful. I heard integrity quite a bit there, and I would say that definitely is one of your core values. It reminds me of Artemis, the recent astronauts who just went up to the moon and around
Oh,
the moon,
yeah.
and that integrity. When they got through those tough times, it was fist bump integrity, and they named their spaceship that. So I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
So, Meg, as we close out, is there one shift, not a strategy or a tactic, but is there a shift in how you see yourself as a leader now that we've been talking about your strengths and those 6 through 10? As we talked about command and individualization, you've got that developer. Is there something else that's going to shift today after our conversation?
Yeah, I think I'm getting more comfortable uh, realizing that my strengths, particularly in my top five, I tend to be dismissive of them. I use the term that they're soft skills when I was talking to
Mm,
you,
hmm
and maybe because I'm the hard technical skills and the math and physics of things we have to do are difficult, challenging for me. Some of the equipment we have to operate, other things. Um, that I tend to sort of prize that, like that's really hard and those people can do that. But I understand that what I can do, not everybody can do either.
Mm-mm.
And it's so, and maybe by calling it a soft skill that diminishes it when really, you need a leader that can pull together people that do have these amazing skills and get them to work together towards a singular mission because we have the most diverse team. We have an incredibly diverse team, people that take radios apart and put them back together and do ham radio work, and we need them on the team. And we have people that can do, other things in terms of mapping and what are called GIS systems and other things that are integral to us finding people that I understand about this much about. But
Mm-hmm.
I do appreciate more now, I think, the skills that I do have that's taking the team forward.
Yeah. And I think that's something we can remind ourselves in the heat of the moment of, wait, I've got this and they have that. And this is how we're going to get things done. And you're doing it naturally because you're one in 34 million that have those talents. So you always say you have to go outside of the state of Texas because there's 28 million people here and find 5 more million people before you find somebody like Meg Hinkley. So just
That's
realizing
fun.
that, yeah, and knowing that I'm here for this time and that's your mission. I love that you brought up mission for leaders to think about their mission. And in a time where we are right now, it's so easy to go external, but what we're asking leaders to think about is internally, what strengths do I have? What do I lead from? What is my authentic imprint? And help me show up that day, every day, intentionally that way, because it's
Yeah,
about managing our energy and not our time. And when
yeah.
we're in those strengths, we're energized. Meg, is there anything I didn't ask you that's just coming up for you right now that you want to share with the audience? It may be how to get involved with Texar. It might be what anything that's coming up for you. I'd love for you to share that as we get ready to close out.
For sure. I would just love to say if you think any of the type of work I mentioned would be of interest to you, if you or have somebody that has some of these skills or think you'd like to learn them, you can find out more about what it looks like. You can go to texar.org, which is our webpage, and it can tell you about where we have meetings, so you can come to visit for a meeting and just to hear more about the work that we're doing. And I would say also um, to keep challenging yourself as you
Mm,
get older. And that I think a lot of times we stop doing that. And for, people in our age range, we have so many life skills and so much experience, right? That we have. And there are so many organizations that can use you and that can use your skills and talents. And so if you find something that you're passionate about and you're at a point in your life where you can give those away, what a benefit to everybody. So I just strongly recommend you do that
Meg,
and
I
find something you
love
really
that.
love too.
I love that. And thank you. And thank you for the work you're doing on behalf of our community, our state, and others, and helping really connect those dots and find those 40,000 people and help when these emergencies happen. It's such a blessing to all of us that live here. So thank you. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Dana. I appreciate that.